Yep, these are the Lindy Frail Fralintrons. I'm fixing this guitar. If you watch my review of this video, it's the Fender Maverick Dorado. You know that my biggest gripe about it are the pickups. They're supposed to be filtertron-y. I think that's what the designer wanted, was filtertron pickups in it, but instead we got like filtertron sized humbuckers, and they don't sound like filtertron. So I realize there's only like 4 people out there that actually play this guitar, the Fender Maverick Dorado. So most of you probably not here for it, but you're probably here because of these. What I want to do, as always, is kind of do as much philosophy and point of use as I do just kind of showing off. I know this is entertainment for a lot of you guys. It's why I get on YouTube. But, you know, it's good to learn some things every once in a while. Very briefly, there's a lot of good videos on the history of the filtertron pickup. My favorite's probably Rhett Shull's or Chris Buck's, not because they're the most scholarly, but because they're the most entertaining, and those dudes can play. But basically, the filtertron was invented almost at the exact same time as the humbucker to fix the hum that comes from single coil pickups. Different circumstances, different design, relatively the same principle to get it done. But these came from Chet Atkins, basically. The way I understand it is Chet Atkins, like the godfather of country guitar, wanted that problem fixed, and so he commissioned and went through the Gretsch avenue, whereas Gibson went through another. They were going more for the jazz sound instead of the country sound. To me, that is the way I understand filtertron pickups. I understand tone through Telecasters. Like, that is home base for me, is Tellies. And with filtertrons, you get essentially the benefits of a humbucker, but you still get the bite of a Telly. So the way I develop tone, the way I stack things, the way I do my tones is through that idea of the way a Telly would react. And so these are my favorite pickups because you get that added mid-range. You get that added bark, if you want to use buzzwords. Like, Tellys have bite. This has the bite and the bark. Do with that what you will. But I'm really excited to put these in here and see how they sound in this guitar. So let's open them up and get to it. Okay, so a couple of things to know. When you order these, if you're going to do it for this guitar has an odd setup. That's part of the hang up with replacing the pickups in it. It's got Gretsch filtertron style mounting, which it should. Fender owns Gretsch, but you have to get their 3-hole setup, and not a whole lot of filtertron makers have that. And so that's part of the reason why I went with Frailin, because they had it on their website. Like, all the things I needed to make it work, it was just stock options I could choose. So it's the Gretsch 3-hole mounting system with the Fender spacing, so 50 millimeter, I think. Anyways, you can see here it's pretty standard wiring setup, nothing fancy about it. Everything goes to the pickup selector. As always, if you're going to do soldering and stuff like this, like, get the good soldering iron. Don't fool with like the stuff you can get at Lowe's or anything like that, like little stick soldering iron. Like, they don't work right. They don't get hot enough, especially when you're dealing with non-leaded solder like I am here. Like, it was awful to get off. Like, it took so much heat to get this off. I was really, really nervous about burning up that switch. But once I got it off, you can see here, I mean, everything looks pretty straightforward. Notice the pickup height, though. Pay attention to that because that was an issue later on. But you can see those are the springs. This is, like I said, they're just humbuckers that have Gretsch covers on them. So I got those off there, got everything desoldered, took pictures, make sure I could wire everything back up the way I wanted to. Check Lindy's website. Comparing the two, you can see, like, they're not the same thing, right? The Frailintron is a filtertron. The other one is a humbucker. But anyway, so this is where you'll see me struggle. I cut out a lot of footage here because I struggled a lot trying to get these stinking springs. I learned the hard way that the distance between the pickup and the string on this guitar is not normal for what Lindy expected. What I mean is, like, the springs were just way too long. And so I tried all these different tricks and stuff to get the springs on there easier. One was using alligator clip, and what you just saw was me launching it across the room and having to get on my hands and knees to try to find it. It was super fun. But eventually I was able to just get it on there, just squeeze it, basically what I ended up doing. There was no trick to it. But once I got it on there, you'll see that it was nowhere near tall enough. Like, the springs completely bottomed out. You can see there. And there was, I think it's barely through the pick guard. And so that clearly wasn't going to work. So the springs that were on the guitar originally were a little bit smaller. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try those. And so I took this off, and I was having panic attacks when I was doing so. Not really, but I was not excited to have to fight this fight again with the springs. But with the shorter springs, it wasn't nearly as bad. So took these off and put the stock springs back on. And that got me a lot closer to the pickup height I needed. I ended up using the guitar like that for a few days, used it at a rehearsal, and it lacked the output. It didn't do what I needed it to do. So I ended up reaching out to Fralin and asking what the pickup height should be, and they said, "Hey, yeah, it's got to be, I believe, an eighth of an inch is like the starting point. Obviously, adjust it to what you need to fine tune it. That's true of any pickup, but yeah, so." I put these in there. They still weren't tall enough, but I went ahead and, like I said, I wired it back up and used it for a few days just to see if maybe this would work. It didn't. It wasn't bad, but it didn't have the output it should. So I wired everything back up, tried to do exactly what Fender did, put heat shrink on the ends of the grounds. I'm not super intelligent. I'm not an engineer when it comes to this stuff, so I'm not sure why they were worried about the grounds touching when they're soldered together, but you know, whatever. Maybe it was more concerned about touching the switch. I don't know. So I did what they did, made it work. Haven't had any issues. Works flawlessly. Yeah, put it all back in there. A lot of extra wires with the pickups. I didn't trim them because I don't really want to. I wanted to have as much wire as possible in case these go into another guitar that needed the extra length. So yeah, got it all back together. Wired it back up. Sent some text messages. And yeah, used it. Which this right here is me stringing it up, which I don't understand people struggling with the Bigsby's. If you just bend the ball end of the string before you put it on there, it's really easy. As a matter of fact, you're going to see me in a second. I took the strings off of the Bigsby when I went to change out the springs the final time, and I left them on the headstock. So I was able to put them back in just fine. So if you just do a little bit of research and take your time, the Bigsby's are perfectly fine to use. I don't have any issues with them. So yeah, after reaching out to Lindy and asking them like, "Hey, how do I fix this? How do I make this right?" They're like, "Just cut the springs." I mean, that's literally what I did. So I used about a third of the springs that they sent me, like the length of the spring. That ended up being just right. But again, this is very specific for this guitar. For those of you guys who don't give a rip about this guitar, thanks for sticking around. For the 5 of you maybe that like that, there's your helpful hint. So I got those in there, and it went in way easier because the springs weren't compressed until like almost the very end, and that was exactly right. So I got out my super high tech Trapper Keeper string height gauge and got them set where they needed to go. Put it all back together, and I mean, it sounded great. I'm really happy with this. I'll do a wrap up at the end, telling you about my experience with it, but. Like I said, this was the only hiccup in the whole install was these springs. So got them fixed, got it back together, and away we went. I've had these pickups in the guitar for a week now. Done a couple sets with them, and I'm really, really, really liking them. They're definitely more what I want out of this guitar sound-wise. It's not to say, again, that the old pickups were bad. It's just they're not what I wanted. I like the filtertron sound because Telly is home base, and filtertrons are kind of like Telly, but with more, and I like that. But again, the old pickups weren't bad. They're just not what I wanted. I really believe that pretty much everything gear-wise is just a tool, and there's a right time and place for it. You just got to find it. So yeah, Fralintrons are definitely recommended. If you are one of like the 5 people who are going to do that with this guitar, be aware that the pickups, the springs that come with them are too long. And so I actually used the springs that were originally in the guitar, and they were even too long. So I reached out to Fralin. They said, hey, just cut the springs that came with the pickups. So, okay. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up using only about 1/3 of the spring in the pickup to get the height right. But other than that, it was a really seamless install. Once I figured out how to get the screw back in with the spring, like that was kind of a challenge, but yeah, it's no big deal. Once you figure it out, it's pretty easy. But yeah, so if you're looking for something with a little bit more clarity, definitely recommend these. Compared to a traditional filtertron, specifically the TV Jones, because that's what I played in the past, they're different, but they're not drastically. Like they're the same thing, just a different version of it. To me, these are a little warmer than a traditional TV Jones style filtertron. But again, if you like those, you'll like these. It's that kind of thing. I think these they do a little something extra that those don't, but those aren't bad. I love those. So yeah, there you go. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.